founded Rome.
He founds the city of Rome. What's the connection between that and Christianity? Right. Rome is the headquarters of Christianity, of Western Christianity at least. Right, because he founded Rome, which goes on to become the headquarters of Christianity. That's why the Saints Peter and Paul, Peter the first pope and Paul, the apostle who wrote a large portion of the New Testament, both died in Rome. They went to Rome, they were executed there. And so their bodies are there underneath, St. Peter's buried underneath St. Peter's Basilica. And then there's another church, St. Paul's, where St. Paul is, another church where their heads are supposed to be. But anyway, yes, that's the connection there between Aeneas and Christianity. And this is a big part of Dante's approach in this book, as we've talked about a couple of times. This blending of things from the Christian world and things from the Roman world, and also the Greek world to some extent. Greece was very influential on Rome. And so Aeneas here gets tied into this, and Virgil gets tied into this because Rome is the central city of Christianity. Okay, yes. Any other questions about Canto 3? Sorry, Canto 2. I'm sorry, Canto 2. About the Canto 2 question, what was that?
What about the sphere that makes the smallest one?
The sphere that makes the smallest round? Yes. What does this mean? What line is that about?
78.
78. Okay, yes. We read on page 81. This is Virgil speaking to Beatrice when she came to him asking for help for Dante. Virgil says to her, "O Lady of Grace," towards the bottom of the page, "through whom alone mankind may go beyond all worldly things contained within the sphere that makes the smallest round." What is this sphere that makes the smallest round? To understand this, we have to understand a little bit about the medieval conception of the universe. Everybody knew from about 2,000 years ago or more, actually, 2,500 years ago, that the Earth was round. However, they had a different conception of how the universe was structured. Until the Renaissance, until the time period that Virgil was writing in, but not until later in that time period, people thought that the Earth was at the center of the universe and everything else moved around it. It's called the geocentric model, meaning the Earth in the center. Or sometimes the Ptolemaic model, after Ptolemy, a Greek mathematician and scientist who developed this model. Now, the thing is, you can do all the math where you assume the Earth stays still and everything else moves around. It's a bit more complicated. It's not super useful. So in this idea of the universe, so the Earth is at the center, and everything else revolves around it. So what's going to be the next closest thing? What's going to be the closest thing to the Earth?
The moon.
And the moon. And then you have, I'm trying to remember when the sun comes. I think the sun comes next. And then you have the other planets. And then eventually you have the stars. And the stars are in this outermost sphere that doesn't move. And so the idea is that everything here under the moon here is the sphere that makes the smallest round. It makes the smallest circle here. And so referring to everything in the world. That's what he means by saying under the sphere that makes the smallest round. And part of the idea here is that you've got humans down here in the middle, and the further out you go, the further away it is from human experience and closer to the angels and God, sort of existing outside of this universe. All right. Anyway, that's what that has to do with there. This pre-modern conception of the way that the universe is structured. All right. Other questions about Canto 2? All right, you have the Canto 3 questions. Please turn those in. Tomorrow, We're going to read Canto 4 today. I'll give those questions out in a second. I'm also going to give you the instructions for your next writing assignment, due Friday night, which is a creative writing assignment. Before I distribute that, though, I would like to make a comment, which is that very few of the students in this class are currently passing. The reason for that is not so much about the quality of your work as whether you're doing it or not. So if you're passing this class, it's probably because you've been turning things in. If you're not passing, it's because you haven't been. Turn things in, especially the writing assignments. They're worth more than the review questions because you put more work into them. Please don't forget about the poem. The poem is worth a lot also. When we get some tests, those will count for a good amount. But please turn things in. Otherwise, I'm just going to give you a 0. Shows up there as missing. If you're missing a few assignments, let's work on getting caught up on them. You don't have to do them all right away. I mean, if you can, that'd be great. Get this fixed as soon as possible. But maybe you're going to need to, we've only had, 2 writing assignments so far? This is the 3rd. So, work on this one, but also work on getting one of those earlier ones done. And don't miss any more, because if we get towards the end of the quarter and you've got none of these turned in, it's going to be really hard for you to do all that work to end up with a passing grade. This is the issue that I have noticed with this class in the past. I've been teaching this class for 4 or 5 years now. And generally speaking, guys who don't pass this class, it's because they don't turn things in. And that's a silly reason not to pass the class.
I gotta turn my response paper in today.
Okay.
It's done. I just got it.
Okay, yeah, get these things to me as soon as you can. I'll take a little bit of credit off for them being late, but it's a lot better than nothing. All right, so let me give out these instructions for the next creative writing assignment. Similar to the previous ones, the prompt's a little different. Here, again, I'm asking you to tell me a short story, either true or made up or based on your experience or not, in which the character gets what he or she deserves. The consequences that the character suffers should be fitting to that character's actions. Okay, please have a clear plot, beginning, middle, and end. Make it interesting to the reader. Think about the words that you choose to use. Ask yourself, is this the most accurate word to use? Maybe it is. Run, for example. Maybe that's the most accurate thing to use. Maybe sprinted or dashed or hurried or something is a little bit better. But here, somebody who does something and so gets what they deserve. It could be good, it could be bad. But here, the idea of if we're thinking from a negative perspective, the punishment fitting the crime. Punishment fitting the crime. There could be, you can have a good outcome also. Somebody could do some good things and have a good result from it. But here, where there's a connection in the story between someone's actions and the results to them, the consequences to them. Because as we're going to see, as we've already seen in Canto 3, with these souls who never picked a side in life, and so they're running around constantly chasing this banner. They don't even get names in hell. Dante is very concerned all through the Divine Comedy, in hell, in purgatory, and in heaven, to show a connection between people's actions in life and what they get after death. So each section of hell that Dante moves through, there's going to be a connection between why these people are in hell and the punishment that they're suffering there because of it. And he does the same thing in purgatory, the people who are being purified, and the people in heaven, their rewards are connected with their good actions in life. So here, that's the idea that we're exploring with this creative writing passage. All right? Okay, let me give out the Canto 4 questions so you can start working on those as we're reading Canto 4. What was that? Yeah, all the cantos are pretty short. That's one thing that is kind of convenient about Dante.
So what's Canto 4 do?
Canto 4 we do on Wednesday. So we're like 2 days behind in terms of due dates. So not the day after we finish read the canto, but the second day after that. As a Canto 4. Now, Dante and Virgil, Dante was in the dark wood. Virgil comes to him. They decide to go on this journey, and they've entered. We had the gate of hell, and what section did they end up in? Once they pass through the gate of hell, they're not actually quite in hell yet. Where are they? Who's there in this first bit of hell, and what do we call it?
Lost soul?
Well, I mean, everyone in hell is a lost soul.
Purgatory?
Purgatory is different from hell.
Oh yeah, the one that was rejected from
The indecisive.
Right, the indecisive people who they aren't accepted into heaven and they're rejected from hell too. Why? Right, they didn't pick a side in life, so they don't even get a side here afterwards. This is usually called the vestibule of hell, like the entry room.
So they are in hell.
No, not really.
But they're not even in purgatory.
Right, they don't get a place because they never chose a place in life.
So wicked.
Yeah, it's strange because for Dante, everything is very structured. There's a careful order to everything. Even hell has this careful structure to them. But these people, their punishment is they don't get to fit into that. They're in this weird location where it doesn't even really count as hell. Yes, they're being punished. They're being stung by these wasps, and they're bleeding, and there's pus oozing out of their wounds, and they're running over this pus in this group, chasing this flag that they're never going to catch. But they don't fit neatly into the system of heaven, hell, and purgatory. That's part of this punishment fitting the crime. Indecisive in the vestibule. As they continue to go down, what barrier do they reach? A river. Which river? This is one of the rivers of the underworld in Greek mythology. It starts with an A. Acheron. All right, this is where we see souls who are going to real hell crossing the river there. And how do they get across the river? A boat. Who drives the boat? Who ferries them across the river?
Charon?
Charon, yeah, Charon. He
doesn't want to bring him
He doesn't want to bring him. Why?
because he doesn't think that he deserves to be there.
Right, he doesn't actually deserve to be in hell. And also, what's the other issue? He's still alive, right. So Charon isn't going to bring Dante across. And at the end of Canto 3, what did we see happen to Dante? After they failed across the river, right at the end of Canto 3, what happens? The very last
Falls asleep.
5 lines. He doesn't quite fall into sleep. Almost, sort of, but just in those last 6 or 7 lines.
He's blasted forth into a reddish light.
Yeah, wind arose, which blasted forth into a reddish light.
Oh, he lost his memory. It says lost sense of.
Yeah, knocking my senses out of me. He gets knocked out by this wind. There's an earthquake there. If we were starting from 1:30, he finished speaking, and the grim terrain, the grim landscape, shook violently. And the fright it gave me, even now in recollection, makes me sweat. Out of the tear-drenched land, so out of the lower portions of hell, a wind arose which blasted forth into a reddish light, knocking my senses out of me completely. And I fell as one falls tired into sleep. Dante passes out here as a result of this earthquake and sudden blasted wind. And that's where we're left at the end of Canto 3. Not sure how he's going to get across the Acheron into hell. Just to repeat a theme that we've had before, remember hell is divided into sort of larger and smaller sections. What are the 3 major sections here?
Oh, that's
What's at the top?
concupiscence.
Yeah, concupiscence, or anyone remember the other term for it?
Lust.
Lust is one of these sins that are in here. The other term is
Avarice.
avarice is one of the sins that are here, but the general category here is sins of concupiscence, of desire, or incontinence, lack of self-control, greed, avarice, gluttony, lust. Those are all examples of sins that are there. And which one of the beasts does Mark Musa connect this section with? The she-wolf, right. Okay. Yeah. The middle section of hell, which they'll get to later, sins of violence, which animal? The lion. And at the bottom are sins of fraud, associated with the leopard, yes.
Wait, where is Dante now?
He's about to enter the section with the she-wolf, because he's just now crossing into hell. If you look at the map, right, so we're not sure how he's going to get across the Acheron. So if you look at page 88, you can see the map there. The dotted line is their path. So we see they've passed through, notice it says here this is upper hell, incontinence, the sins of the wolf. They pass through the gate there, right below where it says upper hell, go through the vestibule with the indecisive, and then they get to this river, labeled the river Acheron, and Charon is there. That's where we left off. So next we're going to cross into this area called...
It says they're in limbo.
Well, that's next. Yeah, circle 1, limbo, is where we're going to go next. And that's what we're going to see in Canto 4, is limbo. Limbo. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
So there's that many levels to upper hell?
Yes. And then there's a whole nother section after that. The middle section has more subdivisions, and then the bottom section again. You can find maps of all of Dante's hell with the whole thing in one big map. There might be one or two in here. But, dog ear these pages or bookmark them or something. I think that are very helpful for keeping track of the different places that Dante and Virgil go in the order that they that they go through them. All right, so page 97, Canto 4, page 97. Waking from his swoon, his faint, the pilgrim is led by Virgil to the first circle of hell, known as limbo, where the sad shades of the virtuous non-Christians dwell. The souls here, including Virgil, suffer no physical torment, but they must live in desire without hope of seeing God. Virgil tells about salvation of several Old Testament, Homer, Horace, Ovid, and Lucan, who take the pilgrim into their group. As they come closer to the light, the pilgrim perceives a splendid castle, where the greatest non-Christian thinkers dwell together with other famous historical figures. Once within the castle, the pilgrim sees, among others, Electra, Aeneas, Caesar, Saladin, Aristotle, Plato, Orpheus, Cicero, Avicenna, and Averroes. But soon they must leave, and the poets move from the radiance of the castle toward the fearful, encompassing darkness. All right, here we go. Limbo, page 97. A heavy clap of thunder. I awoke from the deep sleep that drugged my mind, startled, the way one is when shaken out of sleep. I turned my rested eyes from side to side, already on my feet, and staring hard, I tried my best to find out where I was. And this is what I saw. I found myself upon the brink of grief's abysmal valley that collects the thunderings of endless cries. So dark and deep and nebulous it was.
It's like three, everything is three.
The lines of groups of three?
Yeah.
That's the style of poetry that Dante wrote this in. Also, Dante likes threes. Let us descend into the sightless world, began the poet. His face was deathly pale. I will go first, and you will follow me. And I, aware of his changed color, said, but how can I go on if you are frightened? You are my constant strength when I lose heart. And he to me, the anguish of the souls that are down here paints my face with pity, which you have wrongly taken to be fear. Let us go, the long road urges us. He entered then, leading the way for me down to the first circle of the abyss. All right, let's pause there and talk about the first section of this canto. Virgil wakes up from his from having passed out. There's this thunderclap, and where is he now?
The first circle of the abyss.
Yeah, so now he's on the the edge of the abyss, the edge of this deep hole. Somehow he has crossed to the other side of the river Acheron while he was unconscious. It's left a mystery here, how he got across. He doesn't remember what happened. And he says in line 7 through 9, and this is what I saw. I found myself upon the brink of grief's abysmal valley that collects the thunderings of endless cries. He describes hell as a valley of grief, and it's abysmal. It's abysmal literally means it's endlessly deep. It's bottomless. This bottomless pit he's on the edge of with the thunderings of endless cries. He's here on the edge of hell. Having crossed the river, he can start to see down into the pit of hell. But he says, so dark and deep and nebulous it was, lines 10 through 12, try as I might to force my sight below, I could not see the shape of anything.
What is nebulous?
Nebulous means cloudy. It's dark, it's deep, it's cloudy. Remember, hell is dark, but there are no stars. And as Dante sees the pit for the first time, the top of page 98, what does Virgil say to him?
That's the same as this.
Yeah, the sightless world, the world where you can't see. We're going to go down. And what change do we notice in Virgil? His face is pale, deathly pale. His face is as pale as a dead man's face. Well, so if somebody's
He's already dead. He's already dead.
right, Virgil's already dead. It's just his soul here. But what are some reasons why someone would go pale?
He's scared.
If you're frightened, right? If you're frightened, you go pale. The blood. One of the things that happens when you're really scared is that the blood goes away from your skin and it rushes towards your organs and your muscles, so that you can run or fight more easily, and also so that if you get cut, you're not going to bleed as much. And so Dante sees this, sees Virgil go pale. And what does he think? What does he say to Dante in line 6? What does Dante say to Virgil in lines 16 to 18?
He sees that he changed the friend.
Yeah, he says, how can I go on if you're frightened? You're supposed to be my guide and you're scared now? How can I do this? And how does Virgil respond?
I'm not afraid. He's beaten.
Yes, he says, I'm not afraid. I'm feeling pity for the anguish, the pain of the souls that are down here. It paints my face with pity. I feel so bad for them that it's made me go pale like someone who's afraid. And Dante assumes it's because he's scared. Virgil says, no, it's because I feel such pity for them.
Do you really get pain when you're scared?
Hmm?
Do you really get pain when you're scared?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not always very noticeable. But the same way that people will go pale when they're not feeling well, a similar sort of thing. And of course, when you're dead, your blood stops flowing, and so the blood all settles to the lower portions of your body. So if, depending on what position you're in, it'll settle in different areas of your body, but it drains out of your skin and your face generally. So you end up very pale. Pale as death. I mean, it's part of what makes dead bodies so disconcerting to look at, so unnerving, is that it looks unnatural. And so, if you go to an open casket wake or funeral, one of the things that the funeral home will usually do is they put actually a very heavy amount of makeup on the person's face to make them look less dead.
Yeah, that was like a little village.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a dead person. Yeah. Yep. All right. So, all right. Now they're going to go down to the first circle. So picking up from line 25. Down there, to judge only by what I heard, there were no wails, but just the sounds of sighs rising and trembling through the timeless air. The sounds of sighs of untormented grief burdening these groups, diverse and teeming, made up of men and women and of infants. Then the good master said, "You do not ask what sort of souls are these you see around you. Now you should know before we go on farther. They have not sinned. But their great worth alone was not enough, for they did not know baptism, which is the gateway to the faith you follow. And if they came before the birth of Christ, they did not worship God the way one should. I myself am a member of this group. For this defect and for no other guilt we here are lost. In this alone we suffer, cut off from hope. We live on in desire. The words I heard weighed heavy on my heart. To think that souls as virtuous as these were suspended in that limbo and forever. So limbo here. What is in limbo? Who is in limbo?
People that didn't worship God.
Who didn't worship God properly.
That didn't sin. They didn't baptize.
Right, so they weren't baptized, or they lived before Christ and they didn't worship God properly.
Wait, you say good before Christ?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
To live before Christ?
Before Christ.
Like the Old Testament?
Nobody's not therefore. I mean, God didn't say.
Hmm?
They didn't know about God.
Right, so that's why he says if they came before the birth of Christ, then these are people who didn't worship God properly. Non-Jews, pretty much. So what do all these people share in common? Two things.
Time out. When we read this, do we read the notes too?
You should if there are things you're confused about. Sometimes I'll refer to them. But yeah, the notes are good things to look at for more information. So what do these souls in limbo share in common?
They're not in heaven. Huh?
Well, they are in hell. Different from the indecisive before. This is the top level of hell that these people are in.
They're just like their sins aren't really like
Bad.
it's like lack of faith type of sin.
Yeah, so what does Virgil say about their sins?
Not their fault. I mean,
Um,
they didn't believe in God, but
their worth is not enough.
What does he say right before that?
They have not sinned.
They have not sinned. These people are not here because of some sin that they committed.
So would you say
But what didn't they have?
Faith.
baptism?
Baptism. They weren't baptized, so they can't go to heaven. Virgil calls it baptism, the gateway to the faith you follow. He says, for this defect and for no other guilt we here are lost. In this alone we suffer, cut off from hope we live on in desire. So what's the punishment here?
Say it again.
What's the punishment here? Virgil says, in this alone we suffer, cut off from hope we live on in desire. What punishment are they suffering? They don't have hope of going to see God. What else? Yeah, they had this desire for God, unable to get there. But what other punishment is there?
No guilt.
They don't have any guilt. So what punishment is there besides
They
not being
don't
able to go to
have
heaven?
They don't have any hope to go to heaven.
Right. So they just have this desire. Is there some other punishment? No, there's no other punishment here. Virgil says, in this alone we suffer. This is the only punishment we have. Cut off from hope, we live on in desire. That we have this desire for God and we're unable to fulfill it. And notice, when Dante first goes down there, he says, this is what I heard. Lines 28 to 30. The sounds of sighs of untormented grief. So these people are sad, but it's not torment. It's not punishment or torture that they're suffering.
So like Winnie the Pooh,
In what way?
like these movies sad.
Yeah, sort of like that. Yeah, sort of mopey. Because they're not able to go to heaven.
Is there a way to get baptized in this?
Nope.
Section? No. Damn.
Everybody who's past the gate of hell, they're stuck. Well, with an exception, actually, that we're going to see on the next page.
There's no punishment.
Yeah, you could say that. They're not being punished, though.
I mean, not going to heaven is kind of a punishment.
You could say that. Do you deserve heaven, though?
It's not a right.
Yeah, it isn't. It's a gift.
Also,
In a way, it's a punishment, but in a way, it's not.
Right. It's a punishment insofar as they now know what they're missing out
They
on.
can't even go to purgatory. They can't go to heaven. They
The
can't-
top level of hell, limbo.
So, It's like the end of war.
This is sort of like some ways that we see the underworld of Greek mythology. And notice, we'll see the people who are here, we'll see who they are. And notice Dante's response. Now, this is Dante, who has this great love for the ancient world, for the Greeks and the Romans. And he says, Virgil is in here. His idol, Virgil, is in here. He says, the words I heard weighed heavy on my heart. To think that souls as virtuous as these were suspended in limbo and forever. Even their excellence, even their virtue, because they didn't have baptism, because they didn't have that grace, they can't go to heaven. Yes, they're free of punishment.
So when he starts talking about heaven,
Mm-hmm.
is there different levels of heaven?
Yes. Yep, there's different
So you
purgatory.
can't even really, like, if you're like the first tier of heaven, you're basically like in purgatory.
No, all the levels of heaven are great. It's just that they get more and more amazing as you go up. The workers in the vineyard, whether there's a field and he needs people to work in it. So he goes to some people and he says, I need you to work in my field, and I'll pay you 1 day's wages, the standard payment for 1 day. And they say, all right, and they go and they start working. A couple hours later, he says, I need some more workers. So he goes and he finds some other people, come work for me, I'll pay you 1 day's wages. And they say, great. And then he does this a couple more times, and the last group of people that he hires, they only work for about an hour before the day's over. And at the end of the day, they all come to him, and he pays them all the same amount. It's not fair.
He even picked the one.
It's not fair. And Christ says the kingdom of heaven is like that. It's not fair. And they complain. They say, wait, look, we work for a lot longer than these guys. And the master responds to them, well, I told you what I was going to pay you, and I'm paying you that. This is my money. I can do with it what I want. And that's sort of the way that it is here also. Heaven is God's home. He can make those decisions. Yeah, there's something that feels really unfair about limbo and about some of the other portions of hell. This is part of what Dante is working his way through. Notice here, Dante says that it bothers him. It weighs heavy on his heart that these great people, these virtuous souls, are actually in hell. And this is something that he's going to be working his way through for the whole of the Inferno. We're going to see that. Remember, this is his spiritual journey. Okay, so we'll finish Canto 4 tomorrow. That's fine. We didn't get all the way through. And so please have the Canto 3 questions tomorrow. Don't forget the poems. That creative writing will be due Friday night. And have a great afternoon. A lot of people really don't like limbo.
That's like, bro, that's like being grounded, like, I don't even know. I'll be mad. It's like you do the dishes, but you didn't wait, so you're still in trouble.
Yeah.